a black woman abandoned by her adoptive family, and the man who once loved her arrives on the president's private jet. Crystal lights dripped from the ceiling, reflecting a world she no longer belonged to. Every laugh around her was sharp enough to cut. She stood in black uniform, holding a tray of champagne for the people who once called her daughter. Their guests praised generosity, unaware the charity they celebrated was built on her humiliation. When one of them dropped a glass, she bent to pick up the shards, and heard someone whisper, "Isn't that the girl they used to raise?" The words stabbed deeper than the glass in her hand. She forced a smile and kept serving. Then the doors opened. Men in dark suits swept inside, scanning the room with practiced precision. Conversations froze. Cameras turned toward the entrance. The President of the United States walked in, and beside him, the man she once loved, now in a tailored suit and quiet power. Her breath stopped. Her heart didn't. If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of people, stay with this story. You'll want to see how she rises. Long before the night of the gala, there was a little girl who believed she had finally been chosen. At 7 years old, she arrived at a white mansion with tall columns and polished marble floors. The senator and his elegant wife smiled as cameras flashed. "Our new daughter," they said, and for a moment she felt seen. Her room smelled of lavender and new paint. A piano waited in the corner, a closet full of dresses her small hands barely dared to touch. She memorized every rule, every thank you, every smile. She wanted to belong. At family dinners, she spoke softly, hoping to sound like them. And when her new mother tucked her in at night and whispered, "You're safe now," the words wrapped around her like a promise. For a little girl who had known only foster homes and whispered pity, it felt like heaven. But even in heaven, there are shadows. It began quietly. A look that lingered too long. A door that closed a little too soon. She learned that love in the Whitmore house came with conditions. At breakfast, the senator read the paper while his wife smiled for appearances. Their real daughters laughed about summer trips and expensive schools. When she tried to join in, silence met her words. Later, she overheard a whisper in the hallway. "She doesn't look like us." The voice was smooth, careless. "People will talk." Those words clung to her skin like dust she could never wash off. From then on, she straightened her back, enunciated every syllable, tried harder. Every success was an attempt to erase the difference written on her face. The house stayed beautiful, but something in it had cracked. Small, invisible, waiting to spread. Only one person noticed the quiet pain behind the practiced smile. Dr. Lillian Hart, her adoptive mother, wasn't like the others. She wore soft cardigans and smelled of jasmine tea. In the evenings, when the rest of the house retreated into polished silence, she would sit beside the girl on the edge of her bed. "You don't need to be anyone else to be loved," she'd whisper. "Just breathe, my darling." They'd read stories about brave girls who built homes from ruins. Sometimes, Lillian would hum lullabies until the girl's eyes closed. In those moments, the mansion didn't feel so cold. When the world outside tried to tell her she didn't belong, her mother's words became a shield. They were fragile, but they were real. And though the rest of the family treated love like a performance, Lillian's love was quiet truth. But truth, in that house, never stayed safe for long. Years passed, and talent bloomed where resentment grew. The girl excelled. Debate trophies, scholarships, headlines calling her a symbol of hope. Each victory drew polite applause from her adoptive father and icy smiles from her sister. When the university letter arrived, she ran to share it. Vanessa's lips curled. "Congratulations! Charity work really pays off." The senator chuckled without looking up. "Your mother's project turned out better than we thought." Project. Not daughter, not family. Just a project. The word hit harder than any slap. She laughed softly to hide the sting, but something in her heart fractured. She realized then that she could collect every medal in the world and still never be one of them. That night, she folded her scholarship letter and placed it under her pillow. The mansion was quiet except for the hum of distant applause she would never hear, and outside, the wind pressed against the windows like a reminder. Nothing beautiful in that house was truly hers. Amid the growing silence in the house, the only light left came from Lillian, until the morning it went out. The morning smelled of coffee and silence. She found her mother collapsed near the garden window, sunlight spilling across the floor like spilled gold. Time blurred after that, sirens, doctors, the hollow ring of condolences. At the funeral, people cried beautiful lies. She was an angel, they said, dabbing eyes that stayed dry. Selah stood apart, hands clasped tight, a shadow in black. The family posed for photos beside the casket, all perfect grief and empty hearts. When the final prayer faded, she felt something in her chest go quiet. The one person who had seen her vanished, and the mansion, once heavy with control, now felt colder than marble. The senator's new smile was tight, practiced. Evelyn stopped speaking to her altogether. Every sound in the house was louder now, heels on tile, doors shutting, laughter from rooms she no longer entered. That night, she sat on her bed, holding the scarf that still smelled like jasmine tea. For the first time since childhood, she whispered, "Don't leave me." But there was no answer, only silence. Weeks later, she was told to pack Lillian's things. "We'll donate the rest," Vanessa said, her tone brisk, her eyes already bored. Inside a drawer, beneath stacks of letters, Selah found a small wooden box sealed with a faded ribbon. It felt heavier than it looked. She carried it to her room, sat cross-legged on the carpet, and opened it carefully. Inside were letters in her mother's handwriting, written but never sent. Words of apology, of love, of fear that one day the truth would hurt her daughter more than the lies. Beneath them, folded neatly, was a single note. The ink had faded, but she could still read the trembling words. "Selah, when you're ready, open the safe deposit box at First Capital Bank." Her pulse quickened. Whatever her mother had left behind wasn't just sentiment. It was a message, maybe even a secret that could change everything. At the bank, the clerk slid a metal box across the counter. Inside were papers, birth certificates, legal documents she didn't understand at first. Then she saw the name, Sarah Monroe. Her birth mother. Sarah Monroe had died years ago, leaving behind an inheritance large enough to secure any future, and every cent of it had been managed, no, taken, by the Whitmores. The senator had been her guardian, her benefactor, and her thief. Her hands shook as she read the signed statements, the forged signatures. All those years of gratitude, the false sense of belonging, it had all been built on theft. She stumbled out of the bank into the blinding daylight, clutching the papers. For the first time, she saw her reflection in the glass doors. Not a daughter, not a charity case, but evidence of someone else's greed. That night, she didn't cry. The tears had dried up somewhere between betrayal and disbelief. Dinner that night was the breaking point. She placed the documents on the table. "You stole from me," she said quietly. Charles didn't look up from his plate. "Watch your tone," he murmured. Evelyn's fork froze mid-air. Vanessa smirked. "Con should learn gratitude," Charles added, his voice calm as if rehearsed. "This family gave you everything." "No," she whispered. "You took everything." The room went still. Then Vanessa rose, walked to the door, and tossed a suitcase into the hallway. "If you hate it here so much, leave." Rain hammered the windows as Selah packed her few things. When she reached the door, Charles finally looked at her. His expression was a mix of annoyance and victory. "Remember where you came from," he said. She stepped out into the storm, clutching the wooden box to her chest. Lightning flashed against the white mansion she once called home. It didn't look like heaven anymore. The bus dropped her in Portland under a gray sky. She rented a room above a laundromat, the kind where walls smelled of detergent and dreams faded quickly. Days blurred into work shifts and cheap coffee. Nights were longer. She found a job at a legal aid clinic helping foster children. Kids who spoke the same silent language of abandonment she once did. Helping them steadied her hands. It gave her a reason to wake up. But when the streets grew quiet and the world dimmed, her mind drifted back to her mother's voice. "You are still worthy," Lillian had said. "You just haven't learned to believe it yet." Sela whispered those words to herself before sleep, clutching the old scarf. Each night, they sounded less like a memory and more like a promise. She didn't know it yet, but the same city that swallowed her pain was about to become the place where she would reclaim her name and her power. Sela thought she'd buried that part of her life for good, until her inbox reminded her that ghosts don't stay buried. Monday morning began like any other. Coffee, paperwork, a quiet hum of computers. Then an email appeared in her inbox. Subject: Partnership Proposal. Whitmore Foundation. Her fingers froze above the keyboard. The logo, gold and perfect, stared back at her like a ghost. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. The same foundation that had once paraded her as proof of their generosity now wanted to collaborate with her legal aid clinic. She read the message twice. It was professional, polite, detached, but the words felt like a hand pulling her back into the house she'd sworn never to see again. Her colleagues congratulated her. This could mean funding, exposure, credibility. She forced a smile and mumbled thanks. Inside, something trembled. The past had finally found her again, dressed in the language of opportunity. The clinic director called her in. "You'll represent us at the Whitmore Gala," he said warmly. "You're perfect for it." Perfect. The word tasted bitter. She nodded anyway. There was no way to refuse without raising questions. After the meeting, she skimmed through the guest list for the event. Her eyes stopped cold at one name: Caleb Warren. Her pulse stumbled. The one man who had seen her, really seen her, before everything collapsed. The one who never knew why she disappeared. She closed the document and leaned back in her chair. The room spun slightly. She thought she'd buried that part of her life. But fate had a cruel way of exhuming what was meant to stay dead. This gala wasn't a reunion. It was a reckoning waiting to happen. In college, Caleb's laugh had been her favorite sound. He was the golden boy, brilliant, kind, untouched by the cruelty of the world. And yet, he had chosen her, the girl who always sat in the back row, the one who never felt enough. He used to say, "You don't have to earn love, Sela. You just have to believe you deserve it." But belief was fragile. One lie could shatter it. Vanessa had come to him in tears, pretending to protect her. "She's not well," she'd whispered. "She's having breakdowns. You're making it worse." And Caleb, young and scared, believed her. When Sela's message came, "I need space," he honored it, thinking it was what she needed. He never knew those words had been written under pressure, with Vanessa standing in the doorway. Sela vanished the next day. Love, once her refuge, became the wound she couldn't close. The night before the gala, she stood before the mirror, adjusting her hair, her breath shallow. The reflection looked strong. Law degree, steady job, purpose, but beneath the calm, the old fear still lived. "You can survive this," she whispered. "Just get through the night." But sleep refused to come. In her dreams, she saw marble halls, cruel laughter, a younger version of herself standing in the rain clutching a suitcase. Every heartbeat brought the echo of that old humiliation. When dawn came, she sat by the window watching the city wake. Her phone buzzed with reminders. Time, dress code, itinerary. She wanted to throw it away, but she'd made a promise to herself long ago: never run again. Even if her hands shook, she would walk into that room. This time, she wouldn't be the one hiding. The Whitmore mansion gleamed like a monument to everything she'd lost. When she arrived, she expected a seat at the guest table, maybe a polite introduction. Instead, a young coordinator handed her a uniform and a tray. "There's been a change," Vanessa said, her voice sugar over steel. "We thought you'd be more comfortable helping staff tonight. After all, you're one of us, aren't you?" The words hit like a slap. Around them, cameras flashed, music swelled, glasses clinked. The crowd laughed, unaware they were part of a cruel performance. Sela swallowed hard and put on the uniform. Every button felt like surrender. every step a humiliation she had already lived once. From across the ballroom, the senator raised a glass to donors, preaching compassion. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Sila's did, because behind that smile something dangerous had begun to wake. She wasn't there to serve. She was there to remember, and to make them remember too. The ballroom glittered like a trap made of light. Sila balanced her tray, forcing her hands to stay still as Vanessa approached, draped in gold and confidence. "Sila," she said sweetly, her voice soaked in false warmth. "We're so proud of you. Look at you, doing honest work. Mom would be thrilled." Every word carried poison under its shine. The same girl who once whispered lies into Caleb's ear now stood inches away, pretending kindness. Sila smiled back, a brittle curve of lips. "I'm sure she would," she replied quietly. Vanessa leaned closer, her perfume suffocating. "Just remember your place tonight. Don't make things uncomfortable." Sila's knuckles whitened around the tray. She wanted to scream, to shatter the glass between them, but she stood tall, her silence sharper than words. Power had shifted. Vanessa still thought she was in control. She didn't realize Sila was done playing small. Across the room, Sila felt it before she saw it, the weight of his gaze. When she finally turned, Caleb was already watching her. For a heartbeat, the noise vanished. Music, laughter, footsteps, all dissolved into the stillness between them. He looked older now, his features harder, his suit immaculate. But his eyes, they were the same, gentle, regretful, searching. Sila froze. Every buried memory rose like smoke, late-night talks in campus libraries, the sound of his voice saying her name like it mattered. He took a step toward her. She almost moved too. Then Vanessa's laugh sliced through the air, reminding her where she was. Sila lowered her gaze, forcing her breathing to steady. Whatever he felt didn't change what he'd believed years ago. Still, for the first time in years, something fragile flickered. Hope, or maybe heartbreak pretending to be hope. Then it happened. The sound that changed everything. A sudden hush swept through the hall. The doors opened wide, and a line of men in black suits moved in. Secret Service. Whispers rippled across the ballroom. "Is that the president?" And then he appeared, President Monroe, smiling with measured grace. But the man beside him stole the air from Sila's lungs. Caleb Warren. He wasn't just a man from her past anymore. He walked beside the leader of the free world, confident, commanding. The crowd erupted into applause, phones flashing like fireworks. Sila's body went cold. She stood frozen among waiters, her tray trembling. Vanessa clutched their father's arm, eyes wide with disbelief. As Caleb shook hands, cameras followed him. His presence filled the room like thunder wrapped in silk. Sila's heartbeat roared in her ears. The boy who once held her hand now stood beside the most powerful man in America. And she was the help again. The evening reached its peak. Caleb stepped forward, taking the microphone from the senator. His voice was calm, resonant. "Thank you for your generosity tonight," he began. "But I didn't come here for politics or business. I came to honor someone." The crowd leaned in. "Someone who taught me the true meaning of resilience." He paused, his eyes finding Sila's across the ballroom. "A woman who reminded me that worth is not given, it's earned through courage. Please, meet Sila Monroe." The sound that followed wasn't applause. It was silence, shocked, electric, suffocating. Heads turned. Trays froze mid-air. Vanessa's face drained of color. The senator's jaw tightened. Sila's world tilted. The room spun around her as Caleb's words echoed through the speakers. He smiled, proud, certain he was saving her. But he didn't understand. This wasn't salvation. This was exposure. She stood under 100 staring eyes, feeling smaller than ever. Her throat closed. The air was too heavy. Applause began, uncertain at first, then swelling. Caleb's hand reached toward her, inviting her forward. Selah shook her head. No. The whisper barely reached her own ears. She stepped back, heart hammering. The room blurred. Laughter, whispers, cameras, all collapsing into noise. I can't do this, she muttered, more to herself than anyone. Caleb frowned, confused, stepping closer. Selah, it's okay. No! Her voice broke louder this time, echoing against the marble walls. Gasps followed. She dropped the tray. The glasses shattered like punctuation to her pain. Without another glance, she turned and ran, through the crowd, past the chandeliers, past the lies. Outside, rain poured over her shoulders, cold and cleansing. She wasn't running from him. She was running from the story they kept trying to write for her. For the first time, she wasn't someone's project or pity or cause. She was just Selah, choosing herself. Rain glistened on the asphalt, pooling beneath the dim streetlights. Selah leaned against a car, trembling, her breath sharp and uneven. Then she heard footsteps. Caleb's voice cut through the storm. Selah, please, don't run from me again. She turned, soaked and shaking. You don't know what you're doing. Yes, I do. He stepped closer, his eyes raw with truth. Vanessa lied to both of us. She told me you were unstable. She made me believe walking away would protect you. I was a coward. Selah stared, disbelief warring with pain. She told you that? I found the recordings, he said softly. Everything she said, everything she did. It was manipulation. Her breath hitched. The tears came before she could stop them. Anger, grief, relief. They collided all at once. 3 years, she whispered. You believed her for 3 years. I'm sorry, Caleb said, voice breaking. But I never stopped looking for you. For the first time in years, she let herself cry. Not from weakness, but release. The sound of heels clicking on pavement broke the fragile silence. The Whitmores emerged from the shadows. Charles, Evelyn, and Vanessa, faces tight with fury. Charles's tone was cold. You've caused enough damage tonight. If you speak another word, we'll destroy you. Selah straightened, still trembling but no longer afraid. Caleb stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. You've already done enough damage. Maybe it's time you faced what you've built. Vanessa sneered. Oh, please. You think anyone will believe her? She's just the help. Selah's jaw tightened. For years, those words had broken her. Tonight, they only fueled her fire. You should leave before this gets ugly, Charles warned. Caleb didn't move. It already is. The rain kept falling, washing the makeup from Vanessa's perfect face, revealing the rot beneath their civility. The balance of power had shifted, and for the first time, the Whitmores looked afraid. Selah stepped forward. Her voice was steady, quiet, but carried like thunder. You can't take back what you never gave, she said. Not love, not truth, not family. Vanessa laughed bitterly. And what exactly do you think you can do? Selah lifted her phone. Show them who you really are. She pressed play. The recording filled the air, Vanessa's cold voice, Charles's threats, Evelyn's silence. Every cruel word echoed under the parking lot lights. You can't, Charles started, but his words were drowned out by his own recorded voice. You were never our daughter, just a project we could end any time. The Whitmores froze, pale and speechless. Selah's tears mixed with rain, but her chin stayed high. You taught me to stay quiet, to be grateful for scraps, but you forgot. I learned from the best manipulators, and I learned how to use truth. The power that once belonged to them now belonged to her. Caleb's fists clenched. They deserve to be ruined, he said, his voice shaking. I can end them in a week. Selah looked at him, her expression calm, almost sad. That's not justice. That's revenge. He blinked. After everything they did? Yes, she said softly, because if I destroy them, I become them. I don't want that. Caleb stared at her, realizing she wasn't the broken girl he'd once known. She was something stronger, someone rebuilt. I don't want their ruin, she continued. I want truth. so no one else has to go through what I did. He exhaled, tension easing. Then we tell the world. She nodded. The fear was gone. What remained was clarity, the quiet, fierce kind that follows a storm. Let's go back inside, she said. It's time they see me for who I really am. Together, they walked toward the glowing mansion, ready to rewrite the story. The ballroom was still full when they entered. Politicians, donors, reporters, all buzzing with speculation. The Whitmores followed behind, pale and panicked. Selah stepped onto the stage. The microphone felt heavy, but her voice didn't waver. "My name is Selah Monroe," she began. "Some of you know me as the girl this family once called their success story, their project." Gasps rippled through the room. Cameras turned. "I was 7 when they adopted me, 15 when I learned love in this house came with conditions, 20 when they threw me out. Tonight, you celebrated their charity, but you deserve to know what it cost." Whispers spread like wildfire. Vanessa clutched her pearls. Charles tried to speak, but no sound came. Selah met the crowd's gaze. "This isn't revenge, it's truth, and the truth deserves to be heard." She held up her phone, ready to play the recording for the world. In that moment, the girl they once silenced became the woman who would not be ignored again. Selah pressed play. The ballroom fell silent as her phone's speaker filled the air. Charles's voice echoed first, cold, entitled. She was never ours, just a foster project. Then Vanessa's sharp tone followed, dripping with cruelty. "She should be grateful we kept her this long." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters lifted their phones. The president's face hardened. "Mr. Whitmore," he said, his voice calm but lethal, "you'll be hearing from my office. The federal government doesn't tolerate fraud disguised as charity." The senator's composure shattered. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment his empire crumbled. Vanessa reached for her father's arm, but he pulled away. Evelyn began to cry. Not from guilt, but from fear. The applause that followed wasn't for them. It was for the woman who had just destroyed their illusion of power. Selah stood still under the lights, not triumphant, not vengeful, just free. Outside, the night air felt cleaner. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed and new. Selah walked down the marble steps, each one lighter than the last. For years, she had carried the weight of their rejection, their lies, their control. Tonight, she had laid it all down. Caleb caught up beside her, his coat over her shoulders. "You did it," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "No, I just told the truth." They walked in silence, the city lights flickering like distant stars. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about who she needed to become. She was enough. No title, no wealth, no name could define her anymore. The only power that mattered was the peace in her chest. Behind her, the Whitmore mansion burned in camera flashes. Ahead, the road stretched open. Freedom had never looked so simple. Months passed. The scandal faded from headlines, replaced by stories of reform and rebuilding. Selah and Caleb founded the Monroe Warren Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping orphans and foster youth find lasting families. Every case they took on carried a piece of her story, a child once overlooked, now seen. The office was modest, full of laughter and late-night coffee. The walls were lined with drawings from children they'd helped. Hope lived there. One afternoon, Caleb found Selah reviewing applications. "You're working again?" he teased. She looked up and smiled. "It doesn't feel like work anymore." She no longer saw herself as broken. Her pain had become purpose, her scars blueprints for change. What had once been a wound was now a light others could follow. 6 months later, Selah stood before Congress testifying on a bill to reform adoption oversight. Cameras rolled. Her voice carried across the chamber, steady, compassionate, resolute. "This is about children who deserve more than charity," she said. "They deserve permanence, protection, and love without conditions." Caleb sat in the audience, pride softening his face. He remembered the girl who had once served drinks in silence. Now she was shaping laws. Questions came from senators, praise from reporters. But Sela only thought of one thing: the children who would never again feel disposable. When the session adjourned, a congresswoman shook her hand. "You've changed the way we see this issue," she said. Sela smiled. "I didn't change it. I just gave it a voice." 2 years later, Sela and Caleb lived in Savannah with 2 adopted children, Maya and James. The days were filled with laughter, ordinary routines, and the quiet peace that comes when love no longer has to prove itself. Maya loved to ask questions about everything. James carried his favorite book everywhere, trusting that home was where safety lived. Sela no longer feared silence. She had learned that peace could exist after pain. She often thought of the words that once guided her through the darkest nights. Family isn't about blood or law. It's about who chooses to stay when everyone else leaves. That truth had rebuilt her life. She was no longer the abandoned girl or the woman running from her past. She had become the one who stayed, for others and for herself. If you've ever felt forgotten or unseen, remember this: your worth doesn't depend on who walked away. It begins with who you decide to become. If this story moved you, subscribe and turn on notifications to hear more stories of strength, healing, and love that never gives up.